Welcome everyone to Veteran ETA Roundtable. This is session 11. We got Chris Hartman and Matt Baur here. Thank you so much for being here, guys, and thank you everyone for joining in. As probably most people know, the way it's going to work, I'll give a quick little intro on these guys. They'll get into some content, and then we'll really just allow for any Q&A. I feel like there's a good group tonight, but we can take your screen, take your videos, put your videos on and ask away, or feel free to, put stuff in the chat, and I'll be happy to kind of moderate. So real quick, none of this is legal or financial advice. And now I'm just going to kind of get into a quick intro, and then we'll give the floor over to Chris and Matt. So Chris and Matt are co-founders of 12 South Capital Partners. They acquired, operated, and now sold 2 industrial service companies from their successful self-funded partner search. Chris and Matt previously served as Army officers, and then after the military service, they both returned to school to obtain their MBAs. Chris went to Darden, and Matt went to London Business School. Following graduation, they both worked in corporate America before embarking on their partnered search in 2017. Before Search Funder, before all this, buzz, these guys were kind of figuring it out on their own. And so now they're investing in self-funded search deals, and they're here to kind of just discuss what the partner search journey is like, and kind of their view on search fund investing and how to sell your business. And just from my end, really appreciate these guys. I know they've been very active in the Slack, connecting with other veterans and really, carrying the torch and paying it forward. So really appreciate your guys' time and how much you give back to the community. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to you guys.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate you kind of hosting these. I think they're, a great resource for everybody. So, Matt and I are excited to kind of just share our story. And then, if people have questions, just yell them out. We're not very formal. I put a couple bullet points on here just to mostly for myself, so I don't just ramble on needlessly. So we picked a few topics we thought would be kind of pertinent to the group that we feel like we have some experience and stories we can share that should be hopefully helpful, if not just interesting. And then we're happy to answer questions if they're not related to any of these topics, if that would be helpful. So I guess we'll kick it off with like the partnered search. That's something I've been asked quite a bit about. I think there've been, ebbs and flows sort of in the search fund community around doing partnered searches or not. I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad. I think maybe more hit on the considerations and then maybe some of the benefits and drawbacks, at least that I've seen. And I know Matt's got some opinions on it too. So I think the first is just if you're going to think about doing a partnered search, is make sure you know who you're partnering with. I think it's pretty obvious, right, that you should do that, but you're going to end up spending more time with that person for, 5, 6, 7 years than your spouse. I've spent more hours with Matt when we were operating than probably my own spouse or children. So you probably want to make sure that person is somebody you are comfortable with, enjoy spending time with, and can work together. I think that kind of goes without saying, but it's kind of one of those, it needs to be said. The other is trust. I think Matt and I developed a lot of our trust for each other. We spent a whole deployment together and a number of other years, in the Army developing that trust. You may not have, somebody that you can, plug right into that you've spent time working together with. But if you're looking for a partner and you haven't maybe worked with them directly, I would recommend you at least go get some references for that person and do your due diligence on them, because you're going to be really tying yourself together legally and really in a lot of different ways. So I wouldn't take that decision lightly. And then the others, I would start to look at the consideration wise, what skill sets do you have? What does the other person bring? In an ideal world, they're complementary. You don't all have overlapping skills. But hopefully, you guys each bring something slightly different to the table, and 1 + 1 is 2.5 or something, and in that kind of perspective. I'll pause there and let Matt kind of give any thoughts he has.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I think just to highlight what he said, I think just being very intentional about what you're looking for in a partner is very important. Again, if you find someone that is sort of a clone of yourself and has similar skill sets and things like that, then there might be a ton of overlap. But coming back, like fundamentally, I think people just need to ask themselves, I mean, when you're considering if you're looking for a partner, maybe try to define, really nail down why, because there are certain considerations if you decide to go with a partner that it will dictate how you search and what you look for. An example is if you're not partnered, then you can, probably buy a smaller business just because the cash flows can support it as opposed to say two people. The other consideration is I think just, Chris and I are generally aligned at like stages of life. We had both done the Army, we had both done grad school. We started the search without children, both of us, and we both have kids now. I could see it, if you're partnering with someone that's in a totally different phase of their life, that may have an impact on the relationship just moving forward. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's phases of life, seasons of life, whatever you talk about it. I think alignment there is probably pretty key. From like a benefits perspective, I think there's a number. I mean, I think being a partner kind of search provides a lot of different pluses in my mind. I mean, one, you just bring double the horsepower, right? You've got two hopefully like strong players that feed off each other and can just get twice as much shit done. I think that's beneficial. Certain stages of the search, and particularly when you're operating, like you need as much horsepower as you can to drive growth in the business. So I think that's a pretty key benefit. I think the other is a little more nuanced, but it's sort of like the shared experience. Like it gets pretty, gritty sometimes out there while you're operating. The downs can be low and the ups can be high, and having somebody to kind of help, go through that with you is important. I know I talk to a lot of solo folks that are operating now, and like, they don't necessarily have, a partner there to kind of share that experience with. And really, like, the only other person that knows what it's like to be the owner of a small business, if you don't have a partner, is like, you can't go home and talk to your wife or your husband necessarily. They kind of get it, but they don't necessarily feel that same pressure. So it's nice to have a partner who's feeling the same pressure, kind of in the same trench with you. And I think that's something that kind of can be lost when you're out by yourself potentially. So, and then my final thought on like benefits is around like de-risking operationally to a certain extent. God forbid you got hurt or just had a major, personal life crisis. Like, you just really can't step away from any of these businesses when you're operating. It's very difficult. And so I knew, and Matt knew too, that if something happened to one of us or we needed to step away for 2, 3, 6, whatever amount of time, like the other person would be able to carry the business on. And that's pretty important. If you're a solo operator and, you need to step away for personal reasons or health reasons or whatever it is, you really can't in a lot of ways, or it's very difficult. So I think there's a little bit of a de-risking element by having that kind of partner in crime with you who can step into the breach and take things over and feel confident that nothing's going to get dropped. So those are a couple of benefits I kind of saw. On the drawback side, I mean, Matt kind of alluded to it, like you got to buy a bigger company a lot of times to support the cash flows. And so like when you model it out, like your financial return, all else being equal, is going to be lower. If, you can make the case that with two people, you'll grow twice as fast, the business will be worth twice as much, maybe. I think you're probably just going to accept a slightly lower financial return by doing a partnered search, all else being equal. But like I said, I think there's some de-risking elements there that probably are beneficial and offset that. I think one of the other, I wouldn't say it's a drawback, but a challenge is like, got a bunch of military folks on the call. Like, we all have different leadership styles, right? And it can be a challenge and something you have to work through to really make sure that you're aligned on those types of things. And I mean, Matt and I had to work on that the whole time. It also can just be tough to know who the decision maker is, not maybe between the two partners, but for your internal employees. You've got two bosses. It's always a little bit of ambiguity there. I I think those are things you can mitigate, but they're there, in my opinion. So, Matt, I don't know what you got, benefits or drawbacks, but those are kind of mine.
Yeah, I on the benefits, pretty much hit it. I'm just going to recap sort of what Chris said and what I had written down. You can get someone with complementary skill set. So person A is strong in these skills, and then person B is strong in the alternative set of skills. That's great. Share the workload. I mean, it's huge. Most of these companies, as you guys know, you're gonna really roll up your sleeves, and seems like as a solo searcher, there's a good chance you spend all week long, working in the business, and you get the precious weekends or nights, time when you're supposed to be spending with your family to work on the business. I mean, we even did a partnered search and had that same challenge. So just sharing the workload and having the horsepower. I think the one Chris kind of talked about, but it's shared risk. I mean, we both signed the personal guarantee. So like we're both, going to do anything we can to ensure that the business succeeds and that something doesn't happen. So and then, he hit on it, but just being able to take some time off, whether just for vacation or if you need to for an emergency or something like that. I've heard stories where, solo searchers or entrepreneurs that own their own business have, say, major life crises going on. And at the exact same time, they've got like a business crisis, and it's overwhelming, or it can be. So having somebody in the trench with you that, you trust, that's a huge one, that you trust, that they just take care of it. I mean, it's worth its weight in gold. On the cons, like I think a couple that I have is, the partners may have, say, different vision, different strategies for executing their vision, different work ethics. I think it's different, right? Two different people. You may have worked together in the past. Maybe you've experienced grad school or you know each other from other past experiences. It's a spouse. I mean, Chris said you spend more time with your business partner than you do your spouse. I mean, it's huge in communication. You got to talk, all the time. You got to work through stuff. So that can add extra work. You've got potentially different risk tolerances. Chris and I, it wasn't hard for us to align on like industry and geography. But I think sometimes as people look to partner, one partner wants to be in a certain part of the country, another partner wants to be in a different part of the country, aligning on that. And then just giving up the additional equity. I mean, I also think that partnering in the long run, you probably get more back. It might not just be purely financial, but I think in the long run, I would recommend it. So as I was sort of reflecting on this and looking at sort of the pros and cons, I also came across like the alternatives. And I think that when Chris and I started back in 2017, I mean, there was nothing. I mean, we just had to cold call searchers, and we started with the book. We got the names out of the book. Greg Ambrosia was a military veteran. We called him, and we started calling, and kept calling. Nowadays, we've got just proliferation of content and information and people and ecosystems and things like that. So I think that there are possibly alternatives to a traditional partnership. And what I saw, like some folks talked about the search fund accelerator. There's some benefits there. I think that I've heard people that are like sharing an office together, kind of sharing expenses, but looking for deals differently. So I think there's just a lot of different considerations and things like that. If you're gonna partner with someone, trust, vetting them, trying to work through a lot of that stuff in the beginning, try to, communicate, talk through splitting roles. It's all very hard and you kind of learn on the go, but at least doing your diligence going into it, I think will, hopefully save a lot of pain and tears in the long run. So.
I saw a question here. Was it helpful to be in a partnered search to obtain SPI financing? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, ultimately, the bank's getting, two PGs, they're getting two PFSs, and then of course, they look at management, and so now you've got like two different people that you can put forward and their backgrounds to kind of meet those management checks. So yeah, I would say all in all, I'm not sure how it could be, I'm sure there's a way it could be a negative, but I would say most likely it's seen definitely as a positive. At least it wasn't our case. So
one thing to add to that, I do think that people are finding ways to, and I can't speak to exactly how they're doing it, but when Chris and I did it, the partner search, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, our limit was still 5 million on the SBA. Whereas, let's say you've got a bigger business. I think that folks are finding ways to maybe leverage one partner fully for the 5 million, and then the other individual sign a different loan for, that gives them a lot more dry powder, cash to potentially buy a business. But I can't speak to the specifics on how to do that. So.
all right. Any more questions on partner search? We'll go over to selling the business. So I'll give a quick background, maybe just to set the stage. So we acquired two industrial services businesses in 2018, located in Charlotte. Was about 30 employees when we got it, and about 1-2 EBITDA ish, a little less probably, 4.5-5 million in revenue. And we grew the business to pretty much double both EBITDA and revenue over 5 years. And we ended up exiting to a private equity-backed strategic about a year ago. So that's sort of the background on sort of the process we went through. But I'll kick it to Matt to maybe just think through, what are the considerations when you're selling your business or even going down the path of thinking about it.
Sure. I mean, I think one, it does make sense to sort of build. I think you should really consider the end state. A lot of folks, if they are first-time searchers, haven't acquired, maybe think or say and intend, to buy and then hold forever. I think that's great. I think that even if you intend to buy and hold forever, sort of building with the end state in mind, and also building the business to sell it, will make it more valuable, and I think a better company as a whole. So certain, characteristics, just different things that I was thinking about that make the business more valuable when you build to sell. One of the biggest things that most of these small to medium-sized businesses have is the business is like almost completely reliant on one or, the group of owners. And that was the case when Chris and I stepped into American Scale. There were actually 3 owners geographically spread across 2 different offices, and there was no second tier management. They sort of told us during our diligence that there was, you can't meet the employees. I think a lot of these deals or transactions. And so the reality was, I mean, it was almost entirely reliant on the owners. And if they were to step out 1 or 2 weeks, there was no, continuity, no alternative, no backup. So I think building to sell, I mean, one thing that you should always just be considering out is just building your senior management team, building your leadership team. Having just clean books from the very beginning, trustworthy, transparent financials, potentially getting them reviewed, getting them audited, and starting from the beginning doing that, having minimal add backs, just being as clean as possible with the books. Definitely recommend in terms of focusing on to sell. A couple of things that we didn't have to worry about in terms of American Scale, customer concentration. If you're looking at a business and it maybe does have a little bit of customer concentration and you own it, and over the long run, it just building that business so that you reduce concentration, say one key customer, makes it more valuable. Same on the vendor side. A couple of the other ones, just documenting like your systems and processes. If you are thinking about selling, coming back to the financials, I think one thing that we did well is it's hard to do, but selling on an upward trajectory with your financials. And if you can have, 18 to 24 months of upward trajectory, you can work that into the story of selling, and I think command a little bit higher multiple, highly recurring or reoccurring revenue, financial characteristics there. Ultimately, though, I think, when to sell, it's very personal. We talked to, and I think anyone on the calls probably talked to, tens or hundreds of business owners at this point. The ones that, I've met, the 55 to 65-year-olds, they've all been thinking about selling for, 10 plus years. Some of them die still holding on to it. And so I think building to sell, focusing on that. And again, if you define what your end state is going into the search and stick to that roadmap, then it might help, knowing when the time is right. So that was kind of a lot. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think those are kind of all the points I would make. The one I would say is, like, you need to know your market and your industry. So you need to be talking to buyers and sellers well before you're really, like, considering selling, just testing the market, because, like, you need to know when somebody sends you an offer, like, is this a good deal or not? Not like, oh, I haven't been approached. So whether you're thinking about selling or not, like, there's always intelligence you can be gained by talking to a private equity group who's thinking about, getting into the industry, or if you're looking at doing acquisitions, right? Like, it's the other side of the coin. I think you just need to be in your industry and just be known. Like, Matt and I made it, we're sort of very much outsiders in our industry, and we kind of came in and, like, spent a bunch of time just talking to everybody and getting our name out there. And I think it's well worth it. When it comes time to sell, people will know who you are. All right, we got a question. Let's see. On the front side of selling story, how did you guys sell yourselves to business owners during the search process? Okay, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, we definitely played up the veteran piece. I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. We ended up, buying a company that had 2 veterans in it, and I think that helped us. The other was, I think we just really wanted to buy an industrial kind of services company that was dirty, and we had pretty good stories about different portions of our lives that, like, really resonated, I think, with the seller. So, like, and Matt can tell the story, but, like, his family owned a grain elevator and had a truck scale. So he had scales, and he had to get in the pit and clean them. Like, well, this is what, these owners have been doing. And so I just think we were able to connect to them with, stories and experiences that made them think, like, okay, these aren't just 2 random MBAs that think they're going to come in here and fix everything. Maybe they think that, but, like, at least they have some chops and, like, the ability to get in there and just get the hard work done. Other than that, I don't know if there's any, like, real key things, but I would try to find a story and angle with each owner that makes you unique. I don't have a silver bullet on that one, unfortunately. I don't know if Matt, you get something.
No, I would just reiterate, try to, stand out a little bit, be unique, and build rapport. I think one thing that I did poorly going into the search is that I had come from, the Army, where I was an Army officer, and then I went and worked in, like, private equity finance or whatever. It took me a while to knock that off and relate to just normal people. And so, like, the sooner that you can do that, if that's a struggle, the better. I mean, the other thing is selling to the business owners is one thing, but the reality, I sort of feel like the search fund, the entire experience, that you're selling the whole time. So during the search phase, you're selling to business owners. Your stakeholders are the business owners. You're selling to, potentially investors, unless you've already raised your fund. You're selling to these brokers or intermediaries to try to have them put you at the top of the list. So you're constantly, like, pitching yourself, telling your story. And then once you own the business, of course, you've got your customers that you've got to sell to, but you're also selling internally to, like, your employees and your management team. So the entire thing is just sales. But, building rapport, building trust, kind of connecting on a unique angle, I think those will make a lot of strides with owners.
Yeah, we've seen it with a number of searchers that like if you go in and like start talking about where you got your MBA from, like most owners are like turned off so quickly. Like no one gives a shit where you went to school. Like you're trying to buy their like 60-year-old plumbing company, like it's irrelevant, and like it makes them very defensive when you bring it up. I've had owners tell me that. So just stay away from that stuff. Just like Matt said, just treat them like a normal person and act like you're a normal, and leave your ego at the door, and like you'll probably be just fine.
The other thing is, I mean, nowadays you can harvest so much public information about people. I mean, I might check out their profiles before you go meet them. Again, in that vein of connecting on rapport, like, just drop in. You saw some pictures that something that they like to do. You can work into the conversation. Oh, I love doing this. It's finding those unique angles, those unique touch points, and just being, I think, aggressive and leaning into it. So.
All right, cool. All right, how did you find investors? Did you need investors in addition to SBA financing? We did need investors. We ended up with 12 investors. We approached them kind of, I would say, haphazardly. There was not nearly the ecosystem there is today. It was a combination of probably what I would call much more like friends and family, with a few maybe less friends and family mixed in. I would be very, I would think through who you're bringing in. We didn't bring anybody bad in. Our investors were actually very good. They didn't bring a lot of value in terms of helping us. They brought their money, and that was fine. And they left us alone for 5 years for the most part, which that doesn't always happen. Nowadays, though, and it kind of leads into, our view as search fund investors is like, you can find investors that have the money, but they're also going to actually help you when you're operating and provide guidance, and like probably have gone through something similar. And so they can provide very tactical advice. So I would be selective about who you bring in. It's very much a momentum game. Investors have a FOMO like everybody else. You get a few going, they find somebody else is getting in the deal. They were on the edge. Well, I'm going to get in now. And so it's just getting probably the first 2 or 3 people, and then you'll kind of see it all kind of falls in line. Now, that's, of course, assuming it is a reasonable, price to deal. It kind of goes to our next point. Like, is it a reasonable structure, and is the searcher all in? Like, for us, if those two aren't probably checked, we're probably not interested either way. But hopefully that answered that question. But why don't we go ahead and, so Matt and I now like pretty much focus on investing in other self-funded searchers. So we're invested in 7, I think, minority investments so far. So we're going to continue to do that, and we'll kind of give you our view on what we invest in, and maybe less about us, but sort of, I think, maybe more broadly what we're seeing to a certain extent. But how about passing to, there you go. So we look for searches that are all in. Like there's a number of different flavors out there of the search. We don't invest in traditional search funds. We look for folks that are all in. So that to us, that means like they're going to have a personal guarantee on a loan. They're going to move to wherever the business is, and they're going to operate it. So those are just sort of,
and hopefully invests.
Yes, yeah, and co-invest. Like we love it when the operator puts money in the deal. For Matt and I, we were the biggest investors in our own deal, and I think for some investors, outside investors, that was important because they saw that we were putting, a real chunk of change into the business, putting some skin in the game as well. I think that makes most investors even, more positive on the deal if you can put money in it. That isn't always the case. Some folks you can't, and I don't think anybody holds that against you, but it's only going to be seen as a positive if you can. What else? I think one thing, from I'll call it former owner dynamics are kind of important for us as investors. Like understanding what that owner, like what is their reason for selling is important. How old is that seller? There's just I think that will tell you a lot about the business. And so we definitely try to dig into that piece with the searchers when they're, have a deal under LOI is tell me the story on this owner. Why is he selling? Why now? What's his plan? Post close, is he like, oh, I want 2 weeks and I'm gone? I've seen a number of deals where post close, the owners are either like, the most helpful person and like, you're so glad you kept them around, or they're not. And I think it's a kind of an important component that sometimes sort of gets skipped over amongst all the other moving pieces of closing a deal. The other thing we look for is just people that are passionate and like excited about the industry they're in, because a lot of these industries are kind of boring things, right? And so if you're not like passionate about it and can't like get on the phone call and like act like you're interested, then like I'm sort of like, you're going to have to be interested in this for 5 to 6 years. If you can't get on the phone and like show me interest in a 30-minute phone call or Zoom, like I'm not buying that you're going to be able to do it for 6-7 years. So some of that is just, when you're presenting to an investor, like be ready to like really tell them why, being in the industrial waste business or being in the fencing business or whatever it is like your life's work and what you want to go do. And hopefully you mean it, but at least bring some, fake motivation, even if it's not real, something. So those are my kind of couple points, Matt. I don't know if you got any other good ones.
I mean, I think the all in is huge. I mean, for us, like it's got to be, I think, 2 of the 3 that we mentioned: moving on site, investing a meaningful amount, and signing a personal guarantee. If it's not, if they're not signing a personal guarantee and not moving on site, but maybe still putting money in, we would probably pass, depending on the terms and the specific opportunity. It's interesting being on the other side of the conversation now, and seeing just the variety of different searchers that we've talked to. Of the 7 businesses that we've invested in, 2 of them are owned by veterans, and fortunately, it seems like the veteran crowd is maybe a little bit more humble than some of the other folks in the space. When we get on a call, like maybe an introductory call or even learning more about a specific opportunity, like Chris said, I mean, it's crazy that some people just they maybe aren't even passionate about this specific opportunity, or and we've seen both sides. I mean, we've seen people that are so excited about it, you're kind of like, whoa, pump the brakes. On the other end, folks that you're concerned that they're maybe flatlining during the conversation. So just having that passion, and the story just needs to make sense. I mean, it should be pretty straightforward. It should be pretty simple. When it starts to get very complicated and a lot of moving parts and getting 3 businesses and I'm going to staple them together and do this and do that, and it's too complicated. So.
Yep. The other thing I've seen a couple folks more recently, and it's like when you send out your models, like if you're modeling 10 or 20% like top line growth year 1, like I'm sort of just going to call that bullshit. Like most of these businesses, the year you take over will go backwards. Like, and I feel very confident that from having done it and having talked to lots of other operators, most likely when you come in, the business will reduce itself. And so don't put that in the model that you're going to grow 10%. Like I know people think that will, and maybe it will, but like I would be strongly advising you put 0% or even a slight dip. I think investors will actually appreciate the like reasonability of it. It's not that we don't think you're positive or motivated to grow it. It's like this is just realistic. That's just one thing I've seen where I sort of just lose a little credibility when they put something in there like that, and then try to convince us that it's going to happen. So it goes back to just being humble. Like, look, I don't know anything about this industry. I'm going to learn. It's probably going to go backwards for a year, but then we're going to, get it going and make some money, and that'll work. What was the question? What is your view in the market for preferred equity? Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I can speak to on that question, as it relates to the preferred, we've seen preferred anywhere from say 8 to 16%. We talk to folks that in this market today could have raised preferred at like 6% from specific investors. That came back to maybe being strategic as opposed to getting just friends and family money. So anywhere from say 8 to 15, 16, liquidation preference, preferred, the step up.
1.5 to 2. I mean, we'll see. I mean, most of the time, like when you end up with it, like we generally don't. If the searcher is trying to maintain like 85% plus, like that's just getting a little greedy in my mind. I know you can model it and show it, but like that just leaves like very little room for error for the investors. So like I'm seeing like the searcher keeping somewhere between 20 and or excuse me, 80 and like maybe 60%, depending on the size of the deal, somewhere in that range. Of course, as an investor, I'd like it to be lower, but like if you come in and are asking for 90% of the equity, after it converts, like it's just tough. So that's kind of where we're seeing there's a lot more investors in the space now. So like that's great for searchers because you can get much better terms than you used to be able to. Like that's a huge benefit. Like I wish we could take the terms that are available now and put them on the deal we did, and we would have done even better. But that wasn't the deal then. So the good news is you've got lots of investors. I think the difference is a lot of these investors are, I don't know how much value they can bring. I think that goes back to my earlier point. Like they just see, oh, this looks like a great return. It's way better than real estate. It's way better than public equities. Like I'm going to get on the small businesses, and they just start throwing money at it. But I would just be conscious of like, let's bring somebody in on the cap table who can provide a nice check, but is also like going to be able to help you. And I think that's just my like main takeaway is like, when you get ready to raise money, find people that can provide value, whether that's tactical value, they can bring you leads, whatever it is, some value. And if they can't, then, if they're the only money you can raise, sure, I'd bring them in too. But like right now, if you have a good deal in a good market and it checks all the boxes, like you're going to have more than enough investors interested. We've been cut back on multiple allocations because they've been oversubscribed, or we've been fighting to get into deals. So I think that's a little bit of a temperature check on the market. But it also goes to show that like, if you have a good deal, like everybody says, the money will raise itself. And like, I still believe that the people that come back and say like, oh, I wasn't able to raise it, well, I would actually challenge it. It was actually that good of a deal.
Yeah, I agree.
Happy to answer any other questions. I think that's sort of all our kind of main thoughts.
Also happy to connect like one-on-one if people are interested. We can share our contact information, phone number, email.
Yeah, that'd be great, guys. I'll definitely follow up with the group when I share the recording so that people can get in contact with you guys. I was just curious, are there any kind of, I know, you guys probably, had your specific industry based on your story, but are there any other industries that you would say just for this group that you would recommend kind of veterans sticking to, or anything that you're kind of seeing in the market right now, or just love your insights on that? Because I know it's very crowded with a lot of searchers, right? And everyone's trying to kind of distinguish themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes to, maybe I'll step back before like industries I think that are strong to your point. Like right now, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was very rare for searchers to kind of compete on deals with each other. Like everyone was just looking at different stuff, and there just weren't that many people doing it. I think you've got a totally different scenario now where like most deals, if they're especially if they're brokered and they're kind of in the wheelhouse for searchers, like you're going to have multiple searchers. You're kind of competing against each other. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just a realization that like there's more competition. There's just a lot more people searching now. And I don't know if there's that many more businesses that kind of fit the profile. So like, I just think it's going to be a little bit harder to close deals, to be honest. But that's fine. I think you just got to work harder, and you got to have some luck. Like at the end of the day, like you got to be on the field, you got to be in the arena, and when opportunity knocks, you got to like grab it. We got very lucky, and I think Matt and I will be the first ones to tell you that. But when we knew we got lucky, we refused to not close the deal and closed over a bunch of stuff that lawyers and folks probably told us we shouldn't have, and we just did it, and it worked out okay. So going back to your question, Charlie, on the industries, I don't know if I have like we know what we like to invest in, but I don't know if that's like necessarily where I would go spend my time. And we love B2B services like everybody else. I think everybody's going after those though. So I would try to find something a little different. Take a proprietary approach to an industry that you maybe have some connection to, and go down that path a bit. But I don't know, Matt, if you've got anything. It's tough.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think stick to your knitting to a certain extent. I mean, also be opportunistic. I mean, sort of talking out of both sides of our mouth, right? Or my mouth. Like, I mean, example, before we bought American Scale, during our search, I mean, we were pretty focused on B2B services and industrial. That's what we found. We almost bought a billboard company, completely different, out of home advertising. That was purely opportunistic. So in today's market, given the competition, I think being opportunistic, I'm not sure I would rule out potentially even working somewhere for a few months with an owner if that's what it took to get the relationship, to get the offer for them to sign that LOI. I mean, working there for 3-6 months. I mean, at the end of the day, if the objective is to buy a business, like we're all coming from the military, like there's 10 different ways to skin the cat, like figure it out. I mean, there's lots of competition out there doing it. And there's people that are successfully acquiring companies in today's market and generally any market. So, find an angle, be willing to do something that other people aren't, be willing to maybe move somewhere where other people aren't, try to be a big fish in a small pond type of thing. Just got to do kind of whatever it takes. And then, hopefully get lucky as well. I mean, because that's ultimately, I think, a big factor. I mean, we got lucky, like Chris said. So yeah, but we were prepared to execute when we got the opportunity, I think. So
one of the things I recommend a lot of the searchers do is like really consider moving back to, particularly if they grew up in a city, a second tier city, not a major metropolitan, and they're open to moving back there. Like that's where you should search, because like you have a connection to that community. The owner is going to go, okay, you grew up here, you know where the high school is. Like those, if you look back, and I look at folks that we've invested in and where they grew up, a lot of times it's either in or very near where they grew up. And I think there's something to that. So I would, if you're thinking about like, where should I base my search out of? I wouldn't go like, I'm going to go to New York City or Dallas or somewhere. Like I would probably pick the second tier city, where, to Matt's point, you can be the big fish in the small pond. You have a connection to the community. You can just speak the language, and like as an owner, like that will be music to their ears. And it's not really, doesn't cost you anything other than like, you've already built those connections probably in that community. So that's one other thing I've sort of noticed.
I saw one quick question. Joe, you asked about the technical aspects of the acquisition. And for us, our business didn't really have a lot of contracts, at least with vendors or customers. We had some that we didn't necessarily even know about, that we found out after the fact. So I think just doing your diligence, the equity negotiations, I'd probably focus on finding that lead investor or a couple of lead investors that are, if they're going to change terms or drive, any changes, I would make sure that lead investor, whoever it is, that it would drive change, that they're adding value, that we continually have reiterated. I mean, you want people to be on your team to add. You might say, guys, I hear you, but I just want people to give me their money and leave me alone for 5 years. So, that's the equity negotiations. And then, I mean, in terms of just the acquisition, locking it in, I mean, you've got 90 days to do your diligence. You just got to, figure out the work streams, the financial, environmental, operational, and project manage it until you get it done. So
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Real quick, when do you guys like people engaging with you guys as investors, kind of along the timeline? Post LOI, do you have a preference?
I mean, we're pretty open. Like, I talk to people that are looking at deals before they even put LOIs in. Like, like, we're not very formal. Like, if you have an LOI signed, like, that's great. Like, we can get right into like reviewing and like, tell you what we'd be willing to put in. But if you just want to bounce an idea off us, like, we're available. We're not like, you need to set a meeting. Just send us at least send me an email or text me. Like, I'll give you my thoughts. You may not like them, or maybe you will, but I'm not, there's not a big process you need to go through.
Great.
Yeah. Earlier probably is better, to be honest. I mean, pretty sooner to start building a relationship would probably be better. So
terrific. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks, Matt and Chris, for your time. That was just really enlightening information. I know that it seems like the partner search is kind of growing in momentum. Anecdotally, I've seen it a lot. So I think this was really needed for this community to kind of see the whole journey to where you guys are now. So thanks so much. And like I said, I'll be sure to send your contact info for folks moving forward if they have questions. All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.